gentlemen. Today's session includes two panel discussions, and the first is entitled Why Innovate, and will explore the motivation and rationale behind innovation for defence and business. It will be moderated by Jamie Watson. So I'll hand over to you, Jamie.
Well, thank you. Good morning, I'm Jamie Watson, and when I'm not acting as a master of ceremonies at weddings and other events, I actually have a day job, and that is helping DST pursue innovation internally as an internal innovation program, as well as helping us deliver the Next Generation Technology Fund outcomes. So innovation is something I'm particularly interested in. It's something I read about a lot, something I talk about every single day. But I don't think that's the case for everybody. It's for most people. People are doing their normal day jobs, business as usual, and innovation is a word that's sort of buttoned onto that core business. And so what I thought would be helpful today is to maybe talk a little bit about innovation from a more grassroots or more philosophical level. And I thought it might be useful to just address that through the lens of why innovate. And so I'm joined by some very experienced and well-known people who are very much in Australia's defence innovation ecosystem. And what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce each of these people, thank them once again for volunteering and spending their time with us like this today. They'll give their particular perspective of innovation, and then we'll flip the room, and that's an opportunity for you to also participate. And we'll have some roving mics. We ask that you can stand up, identify yourself, who you're from, and ask your question. If that question transitions into a presentation, I might just help steer you towards the question, but hopefully that won't be the case. So there's some sort of ground rules for today. So how about I start here with Len, Professor Len Sharker, who most people know. Len previously worked for Defence Science and Technology Group, very strong background in EW and other systems, has spent a lifetime engaging and building that, bridging that chasm between defence science and technology, industry and academia, and is currently working through the University of Melbourne. My boss, Dr. Ian Dagley. Ian is a materials scientist. He's currently in the position of Chief of DST's Science Partnerships Division. Ian has a wealth of experience in running a CRC in polymers, and is now really charged with helping DST engage externally. Travis Reedy, most people know Travis as CEO of Defentex. Travis is an entrepreneur, a couple of software inventions that have been commercialised, sold, and Travis now owns companies in Australia, the US and the UK. Travis has 20 years plus as an Army reservist, which gives him a particularly strong defence outlook. On my left is Joe Hine, who works with the Innovation Hub and is a director within that area. Joe has MBA,
Masters in Military.
Masters in Military and Defence Studies, but we'll come today through that, looking at innovation through the lens of one of those mechanisms that Defence has set up for engaging with industry and delivering innovation outcomes. And on my far left is Ian Brown. Ian Brown, I think the term they use in Silicon Valley is serial entrepreneur, right? It's a very special type of person. A serial entrepreneur has lived the joy of a couple of IPOs and currently works with CSIRO, where he runs a series of programs on Accelerate, on Prime and the like, which are about transitioning ideas to impact and commercialising ideas that are generated within the public research agency environment. And we're working with Ian as part of DST. Okay, so that's the panel, but we'll go the opposite way and have Ian maybe give us your pitch.
Okay. So a little bit about why innovation matters. So in my mind, you know, I've been, for my whole life, been involved with deep science technology. So all the things that I've commercialised have been from university research or from hospitals, surgeons, clinicians, and so on. And they've all been devices or diagnostics or compounds or something that's deep science. So I know very, very little about websites or apps or some of those other sort of things that you can commercialise. So it's all, for me, it's always been around patents and IP and various things. But, you know, in my mind, why innovation matters is that by commercialising new leading-edge technologies, we can keep all of our industries on the leading edge of capability. And when I think about defence, it's about keeping us on the leading edge of capability. DST, defence, defence industry, defence partners, the whole ecosystem. It's really important that we keep pushing the boundaries. I was reflecting on it as I walked around this morning, and there's some amazing technologies in the you know, in the area around this room here, but also out near the coffee van, which I discovered, and that's innovative. But it's you know, innovation matters because it really drives our engine towards capability and extending our capability, in my mind. It also drives the economy, so that's really important. For my part, what I'm passionate about is making sure that we've got an optimised problem-solution fit, that we help the scientists, the innovators, the people that are developing these leading-edge technologies to optimise the fit between what they've invented and how it's actually going to be used, which really goes to the centre of optimising the uptake of the technology. So, you know, to get the support, to get the funding, to get the things that will wrap around it to make it successful, but also to make sure that when it's out there in the field, that people take it up. You know, you really don't want to launch something that only a few people take up and it really doesn't get the penetration. And at the end of the day, that's where you get impact, where you really get optimal take up, you get optimal usage, you get optimal impact through the whole lot. So I've been running workshops with CSIRO, ran them with DST, did them in Adelaide, did them here. We've got some things coming up in October in Canberra, university groups that have got applications for defence. There's some really cool technologies being worked on, and you know, I think it will be important to see those implemented and see the impact and see how we can drive the edge of our capability.
Great, thanks, Sue. Well, for, maybe to Len.
I thought you'd do that. I was waiting for that. So, I suppose I wanted to introduce this story, and it's about a parasite that exists in cats, and it's called Toxoplasma gondii. And that parasite, apparently it's been shown to change the behaviour of the hosts that the parasite lives in. And it was observed in mice that the parasite caused the mice to become greater risk takers or even more entrepreneurial. And the word entrepreneur has been raised a few times, that's why it sort of triggered in my mind. What happened was the story goes the mice would become infected with this parasite and then sort of get brave enough to go up to the cat, slap it in the face and then run off again, only that I think caused the mice to be killed more often. But a recent study, University of Colorado, I believe, started looking at this effect of entrepreneurism in people, and it showed that people who were exposed to this parasite apparently became more entrepreneurial, which is probably why you see villains often, you know, patting cats on them. And I think DST will be distributing cats to all the participants in an effort to raise the entrepreneurism of defence. But seriously, being an entrepreneur is not just about starting a company. And so I believe that we need entrepreneurialism in academia, in government and in industry for the innovation process to really get fired up. And the reason I say that is because for the big groundbreaking things that have to happen to get competitive advantage over either other companies or other countries, we need to do groundbreaking research, which means we have to have a vision for something that is really hard to do. And that's not to say the incremental research that happens around the country is not important, but I think we do need to do the leapfrogging over other countries and over other companies. We do need these big visions. And so part of my role at University of Melbourne, for instance, is to encourage academics to think big, to have a vision that they can then take other people along, whether it's other academics, end users, or other stakeholders, along into this journey of tackling big problems. And if we have that in industry and in government, then we'll be sort of tackling these big problems that require the innovation system to really address. So you'll probably hear me referring to cats through my talk.
I'm allergic to cats, Lynn. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
and I'm a dog person,
Yeah.
so that probably explains a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Hey, Joe, you want to just tell us
Yeah,
where
sure.
you
So, as Sammy mentioned, I'm one of the directors in the Defence Capability and Innovation branch. We have the strategic oversight and delivery of the Defence Innovation Hub. So the Hub is one of the 2 signature Defence Innovation programs that came out as an initiative of the 2016 Defence Industry Policy Statement. There had been acknowledgement that previous to then there had been disparate innovation programs across the department that were not particularly well strategy-led, and that there needed to be a single innovation pipeline to make it easier for industry to do business and innovate with defence. So the key difference for this program is that we are strategy-led and work very closely with the force design process, who inform our innovation investment priorities. And then we go out to market with those priorities and then request under an open solicitation process proposals against those 365 days out of the year. So the policy objectives for the program are, number 1, to enhance defence capability through innovation, and number 2, grow the capability and capacity of Australia's defence industry and innovation sector. So those 2 policy objectives really are mutually supportive. We're invested at $640 million over 10 years, so out to 2026. So that's approximately $60 to $70 million every year that we're looking at investing into small to medium enterprise, micro, right through to primes and research organisations and universities. We did launch in December of 2016, so to date we've made 58 investments with approximate contract value of around $68 million.
Great, thanks, Joe. Maybe Ian.
Okay, so my role is to lead our external engagements, that is our collaborations with universities and industry, both domestically and internationally. And we're assisted in doing that by having the Next Generation Technologies Fund, which, as you know, is $730 million to spend on external collaborations. So these partnerships with outside providers across the science sector and industry are absolutely critical for us, and they're critical for defence, because if we're going to have a capability edge and to be innovative, we really need to do that through collaboration. And the reason for that is that the current solutions we have to our defence needs are not necessarily going to serve us well into the future. We've got rapid developments in technology, we've got changing threats around us, and we need to make sure that we are ahead of the game in terms of being at the forefront of the best technologies to defend the country. And when I think about the drivers for collaboration, there are really 4 I want to highlight. The first thing is that a lot of the technologies that are really important are dual-use technologies, and they're being developed at a very rapid rate in universities and in industry. And so if we want to be at the leading edge in the defence context, we need to be collaborating with people at the forefront. The second thing is that I think innovation is increasingly at the interface between disciplines. And so if you are going to be innovative and you're doing collaborative work, you want to draw together people with a wide range of different skills, and that often means bringing together people from different organisations. The other thing is timeliness. It's no good developing something if it's a me too and it's already been done elsewhere. So increasingly companies and defence is moving away from trying to develop all the capabilities they need in-house to solve a particular problem. It's much more efficient to identify people who are world leaders in the various skills you need, bring them together quickly and solve the problem and get the innovation out there as quickly as possible. And I think another important thing about the collaborative approach is it's a great way of minimising or mitigating risk. So if you have a lot of parties investing, the cost is shared, first of all. If you bring together the best people to do the research, you maximise the chance of the research being successful. If you've got a company involved that's very keen to commercialise the technology, you maximise the chance of the commercialisation being successful. And in these collaborations, I think the choice of the project is really critical. You need to find something that's really high impact for defence, that a company's really passionate about because it's going to have a big impact on their bottom line, and that the researchers find extremely interesting because you're asking them to push the boundaries. And in identifying projects and putting together teams, my experience has been that you start with the problem. It might be a company that knows the problem that defence has. It might be ADF that has a particular problem. You bring together the very best people from across the country to sit down around the table and just explore what can be done. You articulate the problem, what the best current solution is, what the problems with the current solution are, and what the constraints are. But the worst thing to do is to tell that group of people how to solve the problem, because you're not after a solution along normal lines that's going to be potentially incremental. You really want those people with a wide range of skills to draw in ideas from other experiences and really come up with step change, breakthrough technologies. And that's really at the heart of getting this whole collaboration thing to work. So, if you said to me, well, what's important beyond that formula? I think you need to have a rigorous process for managing that collaboration, because collaborations are intrinsically difficult. And so you need to make sure you've got stage gating and that there's excellent communication, excellent teamwork amongst those people. But if you can get all of those things right, then I think you've got an excellent formula for collaboration in a multidisciplinary, complex environment.
Great, thanks, Ian. So that a lot of things there we might pick up and unpack, and the multidisciplinary aspects, the pathways, the 80% or the solution today rather than perfect. There's a lot of good stuff there. So we'll bookend our series of presentations with Travis, who can give us his perspective as well.
Thanks. Look, I agree with everything Ian has to say there, and I'm here to represent sovereign Australian industry capability and what innovation means to us, and a little bit about how we've managed to leverage collaboration to try to deliver some innovation. Just quickly, can I have a show of hands in the room of who's from industry? Awesome. All right. So one of the things about innovation to me is a very overused word. People use it to describe all sorts of things which aren't really innovation. But to my way of thinking, innovation's a lot like sarcasm. It's hard to really say what it is, but once you see it or hear it, you know when you've seen it. In one word, innovation is all about capability. The whole reason we're all here is to deliver capability to the Australian Defence Force. Research for research's sake doesn't help anyone if it doesn't transition into a capability that gets to the hand of the warfighter. And we all have a role to play in that, whether it's as a researcher or whether it is industry to deliver that capability. But ultimately, we're all here for the same reason, on the same page. But how to achieve that is the hard bit. There's a lot of smart people out there, and Australia's always been good at coming up with new and novel ideas. You know, DST in its various incarnations with the black box flight recorder, CSIRO with Wi-Fi. You know, these are world-changing technologies that have been developed in Australia. But when you look at the impact that that's had from an industrial base, where is it now? You know, how many Wi-Fi based companies are in Australia? Where are the chips all made? You know, it's not here. So the big challenge with innovation isn't necessarily just about coming up with the innovation itself. It's about how do we transition that into an industrial capability so we keep the benefit of that innovation here in Australia. We generate employment, we generate tax, we generate export opportunities, which then feed back into the next round of innovation. Because all that research, all that good fundamental research that we do has to be funded from somewhere. And the best place to fund it isn't from the government. The best place to fund it is to have it industry-led and drawn based on real-world needs and real-world funding opportunities that come from customers that actually want to buy it. Which then comes back to how do we actually innovate effectively. My company is only 3.5 years old, and the one thing that we've done well is we've managed to collaborate. 38 people. We have 30 projects running with 38 people. That is a recipe for failure, complete and absolute failure. And the reason we can do it is because we've gone out and we've collaborated. We currently have 19 universities with about 120 researchers, plus a reasonably good number of people here at DST. And we've been able to win 3 CRCPs, Trust Autonomous Systems, CRC, Counterterrorised Threat Grand Challenge, not because we are special in what we do, but because we've been able to go out there and find those expertise in academia, leverage the very deep specialised knowledge and capabilities that exist within DST, and package that in a way that allows us to produce an outcome in an industry-relevant time frame. A 5-year research project isn't going to solve a capability problem that we have in theatre today. It has to be done quickly and efficiently. It has to be done by accepting a large amount of risk without being reckless. And that's the key thing, to take risk and accept risk, to accept failure, but do it in a way that's going to deliver an outcome in a short term. So if we fail fast and we learn from that failure, we've preserved enough resources to come back there, iterate, learn, adapt, evolve, and get a product into the market. And to me, the collaborations that we're talking about today and the innovation that's coming from today, and the whole point of Syndicate is about trying to tee up researchers with industry capability. For those researchers in the room, if you're doing research today and you don't have an industry partner, ask yourself why not. You need that industry partner, whoever it is in the room, and there are plenty looking around that are willing and able, to come in there and validate the market need and opportunity, to provide you some of the technical direction and advice in terms of the commercialisation aspect of the research that you're doing. And if you partner early, both with the customer, being the ADF, and the researchers and industry together, if you partner very, very early, your chances of success are substantially higher.
Okay, well, thanks, Travis. That was great. I think the key point there is innovation is like sarcasm. Innovation is not sarcasm. Is that right?
Depends if you have a cat.
Depends if you've got a cat, yes. So what we'll do now is we'll flip and we'll open the floor for questions. We have 2 roving mics. Again, the ground rules are stand up, introduce yourself, ask your question, and try to get that question out quickly. We've got about 30 minutes and we want to really explore this topic at a great depth. So, who would like to go first? Nick.
So Nick, is that on? Can people? Yeah. All right, yeah. Nick Beagley, DST. So both Ian and Travis, you spoke about the importance of the warfighter actually using it, and you spoke about iteration. One of our experiences is through DiggerWorks that getting it in the hands of the warfighter was a vital element to that. But our experience was iteration was the key to achieving that whatever you delivered was never the final result. To what degree do you apply that, or is that truly an important aspect in achieving impact and capability for the warfighter?
Hey, you want to hear that first?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the question. So in the things that we do, we try and develop minimal viable products as early as possible and as simple as possible on paper or cardboard, or just mock it up and go out and test it and seek feedback, run some experiments to try and understand whether people would pick it up and use it, and try and fail early. So if for some reason there's some hesitation or there's some reason they're not going to use it in the way you thought, then get that feedback and iterate. So, for me, iteration is a core discipline within this whole field. And to try and find methods to iterate multiple times and do it as early as possible is really part of the recipe.
Great. And so how does that work for you, Travis?
Yeah. Look, engaging the customer early is really important, and DiggerWorks is an awesome organisation to do that. And I have to take my hat off to ARMI. Of the three services, and no disrespect to the other two, I think ARMI has an approach to innovation that's very different to the others. ARMI Innovation Day, for those of you unaware, is another good opportunity for industry to come and get in touch with the customer very, very early and get feedback upon those sort of proposals about whether they're viable or not, whether they like them or not. We ignore the customer at our peril. If we go off and do our research and our development in isolation and then come back to them and say, here's what we've developed, isn't that great? Just to find out it doesn't actually meet the need that they have. Conversely, if we listen to everything they say and we build the thing that they want, that's not necessarily the thing that they need. And the important distinction is understanding the difference between what they're asking for and what they actually need to address their problem. Again, no disrespect to the services, but they have a very doctrinal approach to the way they look at problems, for a very good reason. But when it comes to innovation, you really need to have that thinking from outside the box. So the hard bit is about finding out when and how to engage with the customer early, finding out what you need to know and drawing on their very deep domain experience, but then taking that away, coming up with a prototype and then coming back and iterating and picking the words of wisdom that you need to and ignoring the things that are going to turn your horse into a camel.
It's great. It's almost infers there's almost tension in this system, and there are inefficiencies and compromises. And there's some complexity. But what I say, is there another question out there? Someone want to up the back? Yep.
Sure. Hi everyone. I can yell. Jeremy from Clearbox Systems. I think there's Ian. Sorry.
Yes.
You mentioned in your introduction patents. I was wondering the importance of patents and what the SCG thinks, what you think at Defentex, and even in the Innovation Hub and in the Industry Policy Division, what the thoughts are on patents in relation to innovation.
So why don't we maybe go Joe or maybe Ian? Maybe Ian, you want to address innovation and through the lens of IP? Yeah.
Okay, so obviously if you want to get a patent, it has to be both novel and inventive. So being innovative is, of course, mandatory if you're going to get a patent. Look, I think you've really got to think about how the technology is going to be used and then make a decision about whether or not you want to protect it. Obviously, the benefit of doing that is you create a monopoly position for whoever has that patent. So they have monopoly rights for 20 years in that field. That may be of interest to large prime, but it may not be of interest to an SME because there are a lot of costs associated with maintaining patents. A normal patent, you maintain it in a lot of territories over 20 years, it's going to cost you $1 million. So you have to have a big market and you have to have a strong competitive reason for doing it. I think for a lot of the stuff we do in defence, you don't want to patent it. You want to keep it as an in-house secret, but there will be some companies that will see great value in a patent. If you invent Wi-Fi, then of course you would patent it. If you have a breakthrough technology, but I think for most of the things we do, you think long and hard about whether or not you want to patent it, and you probably don't go down that path unless you've got a company that wants the patent and is prepared to pay the costs of maintaining it.
Right. Well, thanks, Ian. We might.
So if you want to sell your company, then patents are important because that's how they're going to value it. In the defence space, be careful that in order to get a patent, you have to disclose a lot of information. Our adversaries really don't care about patents, so you need to be careful about how much you put into the public domain, and that's going to allow an adversary to repurpose that information and use it against us. It's a trade-off, but I agree with Ian. Trade secret, if you can, is the most cost-effective way to go. If you can't afford to defend a patent, there's not much value in having one.
Hey, Joe,
I will just add, sorry, I can't comment on patents specifically, but the Defence Innovation Hub does publish our approach to intellectual property, and we have a document available on the innovation portal. But we, when working with Defence, we're looking at access to IP, not ownership. unless there is a national security reason for why we would want ownership.
So where do people go to get that?
If you go to the CDIC website and click on the Defence Innovation Portal, you can click on the intellectual property framework for the hub.
Yeah, great. So we've got another question from the floor. Yeah, down here.
Peter Jenkins from Jenkins Engineering Defence Systems. Asking this question in the context of transitioning from innovation into service. Is there too much emphasis on AIC and not enough emphasis on AIP? Could anybody actually tell how much AIP is inside a project, and why isn't this going to be leveraged to get more Australian IP?
Do you want to just explain those acronyms for people who may not be familiar?
All right, sorry, yes. So AIC being Australian industry content, and then obviously the Australian IP. So, you know, when we look at projects, there's always the amount of AIC content in there, but I doubt very much that anybody could really point to a project and say how much Australian IP is inside a project.
Sure. So, Ian, do you think you want to tackle that from a innovation pipeline philosophical point of view and understand market interventions and all, and just to how that might work at that level? Is that would that be helpful?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I understand the acronyms and the context that well. So, but you know, if I can just revert back a little bit, you know, my comment on IP is really centred around my world prior to being involved here, and what I think is important with IP is that you define it really accurately and detailed, and then you position yourself to make a decision whether you're going to keep it a trade secret or not, whether you're going to patent some of it and then keep the rest of it as trade secret. Maybe it's a manufacturing methodology. There's a whole range of things, but I think no matter which pathway you choose, which can be tactical, strategic and so on, you may you need to make sure that it's detailed and then locked in a safe or whatever you decide to do. I've seen companies do that for commercial reasons, not just defence organisations do that.
Right. Okay. So, Joe, you want to tackle maybe then the policy, and how policy impacts innovation.
I'll talk a little bit about the pathway to acquisition from the hub perspective. So, we do receive proposals at different technology readiness levels. The ones that are at that earlier stage, we don't necessarily have to identify the exact pathway to acquisition to invest in that proposal. It just needs to be conceivable that it might be something that potentially could be acquired by the Department of Defence. But as innovations do progress through the phase transitions and become a higher technology readiness level, getting close to that commercialisation stage, that is where there does need to be an actual identification of what is the pathway to acquisition for this particular investment. Becomes more important.
I think that the heart of what you're getting to there is around capturing the value chain and how much of the value is Australian value versus how much of it is people welding steel and doing the like. And yeah, I completely agree. One of the pitfalls we fall into is we're building submarines, we're using Australian steel, we're building frigates with Australian steel. We've got employment that we're creating to put that structure together. But the real value, the exportable value that comes out of that tends to be relatively low because the combat systems are from somewhere else, the weapon systems are from somewhere else, the sonars from somewhere else. Fortunately, the radars from Australia, and well done to CEA for the work that they do there. And it's trying to find those gems where we do something very well, that we can add value into those big capital projects that leave something behind at the end of it that we, as a country, can then export to other markets and continue to develop value. And I completely agree, it's very hard to see the visibility across a lot of that. Places like DMTC, for example, have been working on new welding techniques that have come out of that, which have application and value, but the real heart of that value is most likely all going offshore.
So that's really helpful. So what you've done there, Travis, is reminded us of the broader national why for innovation and what it does for us and the greater ecosystem and fitting in under the National Innovation and Science Agenda and things like that. So thanks. We'll flip to another question. Yeah, over here, please.
Thank you. John Brady from Rojan, but my actual question is as the AIDEN President up in New South Wales. We've had the CDIC when everything's about 18 months, and the beer talk with the SMEs after our meetings are how's it going and whatever. And we've got, I don't think the framework's really there at the moment, because we've got governance, we've got due diligence, we've got all the stuff that slows a whole government infrastructure in making a decision. And yet you've got the small SME who may be 4 or 5 people who's got to take the risk, he's got to find the cash flow, and more importantly, he's got resources that he's got to allocate. So do I tie up 2 of my brains for a project that may or may not come, and it could be taking 6 months? Or in our case, when it was Rojo, when we looked at that risk of involving the government, we actually got our own R&D team in, brought it in from the States, and just bypassed the government because we need to go to market early. So the question is, do you think that the framework that we've got currently is actually suitable for an SME who needs to go to market and needs to move through that system rather quickly, rather than the 3 to 6 months? And I know they're improving a new system, but certainly from the SME's progress viewpoint, it's still a very slow beast, and it's actually seen as a risk for some of the SMEs now to get involved with defence or government, because it'll slow down your process. So it'd be interesting to see if you have any comments on that.
It's a very big, very complex question, and one that many countries in the world are addressing. And how do we jump the chasm, and how do we, and there's lots of different ways of talking about the valley of death, and then how do we choose partners, and what is the right partner to ensure that capability ends up in the hands of warfighters? So it's a very big question. But maybe, Len, you've been in this game for a long time. You might want to think about, so in terms of seeing things that get from idea into the hands of the warfighter, and talk about, the challenges along the way, the opportunities, and how you might steer things down that right path to end up in warfighters' hands.
So, I've been thinking about how technology goes from very low levels in universities, has to be carried through, generally through SMEs, but often also big companies, to get into products. I think Travis made a good point about this sort of value adding of IP that turns it into exportable products, and I think that's where certainly the government wants to have a greater push in defence exports. But recognising, I think people view that universities, so let's go back. Universities produce the next generation of engineers and scientists and researchers, so that's important. But they also have the capability, if we do this right, of generating new technologies that could give Australian companies a competitive edge. And so when both Peter and John were talking, I was thinking, well, the global supply chain is a very competitive thing. We have to be jumping ahead of others. And so we have to look at industry working better with universities, and universities working better with industry, to be able to get products more competitive against other countries, against other companies overseas. And so I think universities are slowly shifting, and the fact that a lot of universities have people like myself now embedded, trying to get the academics to think of the end user, of end use. It's not about what research we do, but how that research can be applied to particular problems. And that only comes through a discourse between the university and the company. It's a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to say is universities are part of that chain of innovation, and in a sense, I think universities should be involved all the way to operational, just like DST is. It'll of course decrease, but the more that we have defence-savvy universities who are engaging more, the more I think the Australian university sector will rise to be better engagers. So I'm hopeful in that sense, and the Next Gen Tech Fund is allowing this injection of it's stimulating greater engagement between universities and industry. And so if we do this right, I think we can address these issues that Australian industry have competing against, the US and Europe and other countries.
So thanks, Len. I want to flip this another way and go, Ian, from everything you do in helping startups and that, what tools and techniques and methodologies are available to SMEs to get things out there? So what can we as government, as research agencies, and as actors in this system do to help get there? Yeah.
SMEs. So, I mean, there's a lot of frameworks that come out of the US primarily that Eric Rees and Steve Blank and various people described, and they're used to get a deeper understanding of the customer and really centre yourself around how you can deliver solutions to the customer that are going to fit what they believe they need, without sort of deviating too much into things that they wish for. Like if you deliver everything they wish for, you'll be doing that forever. But I think there's ways of using some of those frameworks to think about how to interface with SMEs, how to help SMEs take their technologies out. There's people in every city around sort of startup hubs and accelerators and incubators that have got the skills and the knowledge on how to run those in workshop form or in mentoring sessions or whatever it is. But there's a great methods to do that. So I would suggest.
So how would people access some of these methods and tools and ways of thinking?
Yeah. So you could get in touch with the on team at CSIRO, because they're in touch with all of these organisations across the country, and we could feed that back out so that we could introduce you to all the right people. The on team has engaged, I think, 25 or 30 facilitators of workshops across the country, and they're doing that constantly. And they've got the skills and knowledge to help the SMEs knock that out.
Okay. And then we obviously, for us who are in the system, working at improving access and encouragement and all that. So, hey, as I said, as a very big, complex question, I'm happy to go and talk with both of you offline about some of those issues.
I mean, one of the things I think we've got to do is especially change the culture in universities. So the academics are engaging with particular sectors that they're interested in. You can have the frameworks, but I think you also just need to have them having a coffee with and forming networks and being part of the sector. And
just like what we're doing here.
Yeah, what we're doing here. Now, to just have a coffee, not with the expectation of money, just tossing around. I try and tell academics that often a conversation you have, maybe in 6 months or maybe 2 years' time, something triggers in the engineer from the company's mind. Oh, so and so was doing that. I'll call them up. But even if the academic uses their own knowledge of the community to say, oh look, I don't work in that area, but I know someone at Monash who does it, or someone else somewhere else. So then they become a trusted advisor, if you like, to industry.
So, and you got.
I was going to say, I think this is where these state-based networks that were mentioned earlier in the day are really handy. So the idea of those state-based networks is that a company like yours that is wanting to develop a technology, in principle, you can go to that state-based network, and they'll have a good knowledge of where the expertise lies across that state, and those networks are talking to each other. So for your particular problem, they should be able to get around the table the expertise that exists in the country to help you develop a better product. And I think SMEs need to see as a competitive advantage they have of being in Australia, this expertise that exists in universities, the excellent infrastructure we have. We've got people who are really keen to help. There are lots of funding mechanisms that can mean that it doesn't actually cost you to do it. You'll be paid to do the work if you do it under our expert program, for example. the Innovation Hub is a great place to go, where you'll find that you can develop new technologies at relatively low cost, maybe just an in-kind contribution. So the person you are going to have working on that project is an in-kind contributor, and you draw in all of these other resources and you enhance the potential for high impact. There are plenty of funding schemes out there that will allow you to grow your business, and I think it's just a matter of making the connection back to that innovation network that exists, and you'll probably find there are people out there who can really help your business, and that's exactly what you've done, Travis.
But I want to be devil's advocate for a minute. One thing that concerns me about the current environment, we talk about $195, $200 billion coming into the defence industry. And a lot of people that aren't in the defence industry see this as a big pile of money, and we should all jump in there and get a fair share of the action. And I get concerned that tends to generate a culture of dependency. The government needs to pay us to develop our products. The government needs to pay us to do this and this and that. If you get a Defence Innovation Hub contract, that will assist you, and the experts and the rest will assist you to develop a product. But that will get you up to the TRL 6, 7, maybe. But go from 7 to 8 and 8 to 9 is a really expensive endeavour. To go through there and get your product ready for sale isn't a cheap thing. So if your company isn't capable of supporting the product all the way through that life cycle, then you need to think hard and fast about whether you should be jumping in at the early end, because the money the government will give you will only get you so far. And there's that valley of death which you have to get across, that you have to find external funding for, that you need to think about before you embark on that program. Otherwise, the technology will never come to fruition.
Could I just comment back on the academic side, because it's interesting. We're running on Accelerate, on Prime, on Launch Camp. Launch Camp is one that's run on campus for universities, but they're all predicated on the academics got an idea and they want to take it and have impact. But one of the universities recently contacted me and said, this is all great, we love it, but we'd actually like something earlier than that, and we'd like something that's focused on giving academics the skills and knowledge on how to embark on an engaging with industry piece. And what's the planning that goes into that? How are you going to navigate that? How are you going to open up the networks? How are you going to follow that up? It's almost like 101, have coffee a lot. And don't expect too much, and just build relationships. But it's, there's skills and knowledge and things that you can impart. And we've designed a 4-hour professional development program for academics to reach out to industry. And I think some of those things, I agree completely, some of those things will change the culture.
I mean, one of the problems I see in the academic sector is people aren't thinking big enough. And let's put aside the industry, even just coming up with big, challenging research problems. Now, science do it with, let's find 2 neutron stars colliding in some far-off galaxy, and so they do big science. But I mean, especially engineering doesn't tend to do big, think big, and so that's one problem. But the other thing is the thinking big, visioning piece needs to be done with industry so that if you can create a vision for a new technology that is also reachable, I mean, it could be actually require $100 million to do, but is reachable when working with industry, then as you're moving along that path to this big vision, you have technology falling out that isn't usable along the way. And so to me, that's the visioning piece. I talked about entrepreneurship, so I'm promoting the entrepreneurial academic. It's not about starting companies. In fact, that's not my piece. There's plenty of people doing that. But it's about having a vision and then taking people along with you, that vision. And in a sense, I'm asking also industry to come along with that too, and to encourage that. Often I mean, I've seen it for however long I've been in this game. The military look at DST, call them boffins. The industry looks at university and so they're up in their ivory towers. We all have these terms, and then university look at industry and so they're just doing low-level stuff. Everyone's got these views, but we've got to sort of break through these almost prejudice views and start actually respecting each other for what we can bring along. And some, industry could be lacking with that engagement piece, or it could be university. People are at varying degrees of ability to engage, and we've just got to have a bit of compassion as we move across.
And I think, and this panel is reflective of that, to give outcomes. This panel reflects the various viewpoints and contributions to give that outcome. So I'm conscious we've only got a few more moments. I want to give maybe one or two other people to ask questions. Those were two very good questions that it generated a very rich dialogue. So another couple of questions before we close. Yeah.
Hi, it's Jim Louie here from CSIRO. Perhaps a question to Travis and the panel more broadly is around, so what do you focus on to inspire the innovative behaviours of people in your organisation, given the number of relationships you've developed, the number of projects, what frame do you use to hire the right people and inspire them to do all of that? I assume you don't just manage it, I assume you've got some magic sauce.
So I'll repeat the question for those who are... So the question is all about what does, for the panel, but specifically for Travis, what does he do to inspire and encourage innovation in an organisation that sounds very busy, and what does he do to hire the right people to do that?
So unfortunately, I still sit on the panel for every person I hire, and cultural fit first and foremost. Technical skills we can teach, cultural fit you can't. If someone doesn't fit, if they don't have that risk-taking appetite, if they're not trustworthy, if they don't have the spirit and the desire to go out and learn, then they're never going to fit to that environment. So first and foremost, being a greenfields organisation, I had the benefit of being able to select people from day one that were going to fit the culture. An organisation such as yours or DST has rich history, and with that comes legacy, and it's harder to manage that. So the two environments aren't directly applicable. But after that comes trust. Now, trust is absolute. Any of the engineering team that work there know that they have my trust to go out there and make decisions. I don't have to sign off on every decision they make. I'm willing to back them 100% when they do that, and it's okay if they fail, as long as they do it quickly, safely and efficiently. So by encouraging them to always engage, to go out to events like this, to go to the universities, to try to mentor some of the new students that are coming through, running final year projects and all the rest, gives them the ability to explore their own creativity. If they don't feel like they can create, it's not because I tell them they have to make X, but most of the ideas come from the team. And they're looking at ideas and solutions and come back and say, why don't we try to do something? And the worst thing you can do is say no. You've got to find a way to enable them to go out there and explore it and remain creative.
All right. So maybe one final question.
I might just pick up on this idea of inspiring people.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's a really important point. And I'm sort of making a context in terms of a collaborative project, long-term, where you're trying to inspire a company to do something that really is breakthrough, or you're trying to inspire DST researchers in a theme to think about what they can do. I think in a lot of areas of technology there are holy grails, where everyone in the industry knows that if only we could do this it would be great, and no one's been able to do it. And I think those sorts of things are perfect for a collaborative project, because you're trying to develop world-leading technology. You're trying to do something that, if only you could achieve this, it would have fantastic outcomes. And that's why the collaborative mechanism is so good. If you can put together the best team around that, everyone's really inspired. The companies, the board members of the company are on the edge of their seat, because if this is a success, it's going to be a breakthrough. The researchers are doing science that they're developing the science that we need to solve the problem, because the solution is not here today. So I think it's all around choosing the right project. There are lots of things we can do. If you're going to put together a team to collaborate, you don't want to do something incremental. You've really got to set your sights high. I can give you an example. One of the things that we did in our CRC was we were working on a technology for a single injection vaccine. So you don't have to come back for a booster. So what does that mean? It means that half of the herd of Australia above the tick line, that's 9 million cattle, you can now protect them against tick, because they're only mustered once a year, so they can't get the booster. It means potentially in third world that people who can only ever get one injection, they can't travel back for another. can be protected. So those sorts of problems, developing something that everyone knows would be fantastic is exactly what you need to do. So it's raising your sights high.
Yeah, maybe one final question, right at the back here, please. Yes.
Thanks very much. Brendan Nicholson from ASPI. We've all heard the horror stories of people who've come up with innovation going right back to the black box and other developments. Even the people with CEA radar had some troubles actually getting it accepted. And now it's a serious piece of technology that we lead the world in. The black box almost didn't make it, and I don't think we ever patented it when we could have. Are you finding that attitudes are changing to the point where you can actually get your innovations through the system and into the hands of the people in the front lines who actually need them?
That's a great question, and I'm looking at maybe that empty seat is maybe I should have had an operator on this panel. I'll accept the hit on that. But maybe, Joe, you want to talk about what is the hub doing in terms of changing that interface with operators and the uptake and the transition into projects thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the governance around the investment decisions brings in the capability managers representing all of the groups and also, the services and the groups across the department. When we look to invest in an innovation, it does actually need to have a capability manager sponsor, and we work very closely with those capability managers through the project management and delivery of the investment. So that's something that's really important if we're looking towards that pathway to acquisition into service. We're a relatively new program, the Defence Innovation Hub, so we're yet to have one of those success stories, but that ultimately is what we're aiming to do. So enhancing the capability of defence through innovation. So ultimately that's where we like to be.
If I might process is important to capture as a safety net, but when you think of black box, CEA technologies, NOLCA, over-the-horizon radar, those things were driven by individuals, and sometimes those individuals passed the baton on to others, like Jindalee took decades. NOLCA, there are a handful of people who made it happen in adverse situations because people were trying to kill it. People were trying to kill CEA's radar. They were trying to kill over-the-horizon radar. But it was the entrepreneurship of certain individuals who had the drive to see it through. So regardless of how bad our processes are in defence, these people will make it happen. So I still think, the resilience of the leader, the research leader, or the engineer, or the CEO, or the CTO is what is actually going to make these things happen, regardless of what systems we have. It's important to have effective systems. We've got to keep improving them. But I reckon if you have a good entrepreneur, they're going to make it happen, like Elon Musk.
So we'll probably wrap it up there, and that's a beautiful way to end, say, in this great complex system with so many things at play, with the role of government and academia and industry, the challenges of process and the uptake, that Len's ended and capped off the whole conversation. It's going to come down to individuals, and that ties in with even what Professor Sampson said earlier. So that's been a great panel. I thank you all. I thank our participants. But we do need to jump up, get out of these seats and quickly reset for the next panel. So why don't we show our appreciation to all the panel members.